Daniel said it quietly. That was the part that stayed with me longest afterward. Not the word itself, though the word landed hard enough. The quietness of it. The casual certainty of someone who has believed something for so long that saying it out loud feels less like an insult and more like a simple statement of fact. Nobody. He said it in my mother's kitchen 3 days after her funeral while the relatives were still filtering through the house, leaving casseroles and condolences and the particular exhausted kindness of people who have done everything they can think of to do and are now simply present because presence is all that remains. I was washing dishes at the sink. Daniel was standing in the doorway with a cup of coffee and the particular ease of a man who has always understood himself to be the he said it in my mother's kitchen 3 days after her funeral while the relatives were still filtering through the house, leaving casseroles and condolences, and the particular exhausted kindness of people who have done everything they can think of to do and are now simply present because presence is all that remains. D was this. Mom always felt sorry for her. That's the only reason she kept her around. Lily was never really one of us. Sandra made a small sound that was not agreement, but was not disagreement either. The particular noncommittal response of a woman who had learned over 15 years of marriage that the most comfortable position in Daniel's vicinity was slightly adjacent to whatever he was saying. I kept washing dishes. My hands were steady. I was 28 years old, and my mother had been dead for 72 hours, and my brother had just told his wife that I was never really one of them. He was wrong about that. Mom had made sure he would be wrong about it. I knew what was in the envelope. My name is Lily Harmon, and I am 28 years old. I am my mother's daughter in every way that matters. Not her biological daughter. I want to be clear about that from the beginning, because the story I am telling requires honesty about its own shape. My mother, Carol Harmon, adopted me when I was 3 years old from the foster care system in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'd been in care since I was 18 months old. The circumstances of my biological family I did not know in any detail until I was considerably older, and the details, when they arrived, were the kind that explain a great many things without making any of them easier. Carol was 41 years old when she adopted me. A single woman, a high school English teacher. My mother, Carol Harmon, adopted me when I was 3 years old from the foster care system in Charlotte, North Carolina. I had been in care since I was 18 months old. The circumstances of my biological family I did not know in any detail until I was considerably older, and the details, when they arrived, were the kind that explain a great many things without making any of them easier. Carol was 41 years old when she adopted me. A single woman. A high school English teacher who had wanted children for years and whose marriage had ended in her mid-30s without producing them, and who had decided at 41 that the traditional sequence of events was not going to be her sequence, and that she was going to become a mother through whatever path was available to her. Well-meaning skepticism of people who thought a single woman of 41 was taking on more than she should. She had won. I had come home to her at 3 years old. Daniel was Carol's son from her first marriage. He was 14 years older than me. He had been 22 when I was adopted and had been living on his own for 2 years, and had received the news of my adoption with the particular complicated reaction of a grown child discovering that their parent has made a significant life decision without consulting them. He had been polite about it. Not warm. Polite. That politeness had characterized our relationship for my entire childhood and into my adult life. Never cruel. Never overtly hostile. Simply the consistent man. He had been 22 when I was adopted, and had been living on his own for 2 years, and had received the news of my adoption with the particular complicated reaction of a grown child discovering that their parent had made a significant life decision without consulting them. He had spent 25 years preparing for the moment when it would matter most. Carol Harmon died on a Thursday morning in April from a stroke that was sudden enough that none of us had time to prepare, and that left the particular specific grief of loss that arrives without warning. The kind that has no cushioning of anticipation, no gradual adjustment, simply a before and an after with nothing between them. She was 66 years old. She had been healthy, active, still teaching. Still the particular version of herself that had changed relatively little. Carol Harmon died on a Thursday morning in April from a stroke that was sudden enough that none of us had time to prepare, and that left the particular specific grief of loss that arrives without warning. The kind that has no cushioning of anticipation, no gradual adjustment, simply a before and an after with nothing between them. An extraordinary essay about her grandmother. She had asked about my work. Still, the particular version of herself that had changed relatively little from the version I had known my entire life. Organized, warm, direct, someone whose classroom had been full every year, with students who understood that Mrs. Harmon actually cared whether they learned anything .V been through them, recognized immediately, and that is difficult to describe to people who haven't. You move through practical tasks because practical tasks are available and grief is not yet fully real, and doing things is more bearable than feeling things in their complete weight. Daniel arrived from Richmond on Thursday evening. Sandra arrived with him. Their 2 teenage children stayed home at Sandra's insistence, which I thought was the right call, and which Daniel seemed mildly relieved about. Daniel managed the practical tasks of those days with genuine competence. You move through practical tasks because practical tasks are available, and grief is not yet fully real, and doing things is more bearable than feeling things in their complete weight. Acted on the relatives whose contact information he had, and I contacted the ones whose information I had, and between us, the practical infrastructure of grief was assembled efficiently. We did not talk much about our mother. No, not because either of us was avoiding it, or not only because of that, because there was too much to do, and because talking about her would have required a stillness that the doing was protecting us from. On Saturday, he made the comment in the kitchen. He contacted the relatives whose contact information he had, and I contacted the ones whose information I had, and between us, the practical infrastructure of grief was assembled efficiently. Attorney's office on Tuesday.Y. My mother's attorney was a woman named Frances Odom. She practiced in Charlotte and had handled my mother's affairs for 12 years. I had met her once before, briefly, at a function connected to the school where my mother taught. She was 60, precise, with the particular quality of someone who had spent decades in rooms where important things were being decided and had developed an absolute economy of expression as a result. She called me on Sunday. Not Daniel, me. She said she wanted to confirm that I would be at the Tuesday appointment, and she said it in a way that communicated without stating that Tuesday's appointment was significant in ways that went beyond the routine administration of an estate. I said I would be there. She said good. One word. But the quality of it. I thought about my mother. About a conversation we had had 2 years earlier on the porch of her house on a Sunday afternoon in October when the light was doing what Akshi said she wanted to confirm that I would be at the Tuesday appointment. And she said it in a way that communicated without stating that Tuesday's appointment was significant in ways that went beyond the routine administration of an estate.d of that conversation. She had said, Lily, I need you to trust me about something. I need you to trust me. About a conversation we had had 2 years earlier on the porch of her house on a Sunday afternoon in October, when the light was doing what October light does in Charlotte. Warm and specific and full of a kind of honesty that easier seasons don't quite manage. Precise, warm, and completely certain about her own decisions and entirely uninterested in explaining them before. At the end of that conversation, she had said, Lily, I need you to trust me about something. I need you to trust that I have thought carefully about what I am going to do and that what I am going to do is right, even if it takes a moment to fully land .S where the work is more important than the setting .G. Daniel and Sandra arrived before me. Daniel was in a suit. He was always in a suit for professional contexts, and he had decided this was a professional context, which told me something about how he understood Tuesday's appointment. I wore a dark blue dress my mother had given me for my birthday 2 years earlier. I had not planned that consciously. I noticed it when I was getting dressed and decided it was the right choice. Frances came in at exactly 9 o'clock. She set a folder on the desk. She looked at Daniel. She looked at Sandra. She was always in a suit for professional context, and he had decided this was a professional context, which told me something about how he understood Tuesday's appointment. I'd thank you in the particular tone of someone who is ready to move through the formalities efficiently. Frances opened the folder. She began with the standard elements of the estate, the house, the retirement accounts, the savings, a small investment portfolio Carol had built carefully over 20 years of a teacher's salary through consistent and disciplined contribution. Daniel listened with the focused attention of someone taking inventory. I listened too. I already knew the broad shape of what was coming, not the specifics. My mother had not told me specifics, but the shape. Frances reached the end of the standard elements. Then she said there was one additional document. She reached into the folder. a small investment portfolio Carol had built carefully over 20 years of a teacher's salary through consistent and disciplined contributions. Ends. T my name. Daniel's expression changed, not dramatically, a small shift. The particular recalibration of someone who has been expecting one thing and has just understood that something else is happening. Frances said my mother had asked her to read the letter aloud in the presence of both of us. Daniel said that was unusual. Frances said it was Carol's specific instruction. Daniel looked at the envelope. Then he looked at me. I looked back. Frances opened the envelope. She unfolded the letter. She began to read. My mother had written 4 pages. Frances read them in the steady, measured voice of someone who understood that pace mattered here. That these words needed to arrive clearly and completely, and that rushing them would cost them something important. My mother had written about her life, not a summary. Specific things. The specific sequence of decisions that had shaped her into the person who was now communicating from beyond a Thursday morning in April through 4 pages of deliberate handwriting. She wrote about choosing to adopt at 41. About the particular certainty of that choice. About the photograph and the recognition she had described to me. And the fight through the process. And the Thursday afternoon in June when she had brought me home and what that afternoon had felt like. She wrote about Daniel. Not cruelly. My mother was not capable of cruelty in her writing any more than she had been capable of it in her life. But honestly, with the particular honesty of someone who no longer has anything to manage or protect and can simply say what is true. She wrote that she had watched Daniel keep his distance from me for 25 years, that she had tried in the ways available to her to close that distance and had not succeeded. That she had accepted this as a limitation of what she could control and had decided that what she could control was the record. She wrote that the record should be accurate. She wrote that I was her daughter, not her adopted daughter, not her other daughter, her daughter, full stop. In every way she had ever understood that word across 66 years of living and thinking carefully about what words meant. She wrote that the estate, beyond the standard elements Frances had already addressed, included the house. She paused. Frances paused. She looked at Daniel briefly before continuing. Then she read the next sentence. The house on Elmwood Drive, my mother had written. I am leaving to Lily. Completely and without condition. Because Lily is the one who sat with me on that porch on Sunday afternoons. Because Lily is the one who calls on Wednesday evenings. Because Lily is the one who drove 3 hours when I had the flu in 2019 and did not tell me she was coming, so I could not tell her not to bother. Because a house should go to the person who already understands what a house is for. Frances stopped reading for a moment. The room was very quiet. Daniel's face had gone through several things while Frances read that paragraph. I watched it happen. The inventory expression was gone. Something had replaced it that I had not seen on Daniel's face in 25 years of knowing him. Not anger. Something more complicated. Frances continued. My mother had written, Daniel, I know this will be difficult. I need you to know that I am not doing this to hurt you or to make a statement about my love for you. I love you. I have loved you since the particular freezing Thursday in February when you arrived in the world and made me a mother for the first time. That love is not conditional, and it is not comparative. But I have enough money in the accounts and the portfolio to provide for you substantially. The house is not about the money. The house is about what the house means. And what the house means is Lily. It has meant Lily for 25 years. I am simply making the paperwork agree with that truth. Then she wrote the line that made Daniel's face do the thing I had been watching for. She wrote, I have one more thing to say, and I am saying it to both of you. Daniel, you told Sandra once. I was in the next room and I heard it. I always heard more than either of you knew. That Lily was never really one of us. I need you to understand something before I am gone. She was always more one of us than you knew how to see. The limitation was never hers. Frances finished reading. She folded the letter. She set it on the desk. She looked at Daniel. Daniel's face had gone pale. Not the dramatic pallor of movies. The specific pall of a person who has just learned that a private thing they said was heard by the person it was about, and was then written down and read aloud after that person's death in a room with witnesses. The pale of someone understanding the full shape of a thing they had thought was smaller than it was. Sandra put her hand on his arm. He did not respond to it. He was looking at me. I was looking back. Nobody spoke for a moment. Frances organized the papers on her desk with the deliberate focus of someone giving a room the time it needs without explicitly granting it. That was a skill. I noticed it and appreciated it. Daniel cleared his throat. He said my name. Lily. I waited. He looked at the desk, at the folded letter, at his hands. I did not know she heard that, he said. I know, I said. I should not have said it. No, I agreed. You shouldn't have. He was quiet for another moment. Sandra was very still beside him. Not the non-committal adjacent position she usually occupied. Something more careful. The posture of a woman reassessing. The house, Daniel said finally. Yes, I said. He looked at Frances. Is it legally structured the way you described? Frances said it was. The house had been held in a trust with Lily Harmon as the sole beneficiary. The structure was clean and unambiguous. Daniel nodded slowly. He did not contest it. I want to be clear about that, because the story could continue in the direction of legal dispute and the particular ugliness of contested estates, and all the things that follow when grief and money and old resentments combine in courtrooms. That did not happen. Daniel looked at Frances and nodded, and then he looked at me and said, She knew what she was doing. She always knew what she was doing, I said. He almost smiled. The involuntary kind. The kind that arrives before the person has decided whether to allow it. Yeah, he said quietly. She did. We walked out of Frances Odom's office into a Charlotte morning that was warm in the particular way April mornings in Charlotte are warm. Provisional. Not quite committed to the temperature yet. The city still deciding what the day would be. Sandra went to get the car. Daniel and I stood on the sidewalk. He looked at the street for a moment. Then he said something I had not been expecting. He said, I want to tell you something. I waited. When Mom first told me she was adopting, he said, I thought she was making a mistake. I thought she was lonely and making a decision that was going to be harder than she understood. He paused. I was 22. I thought I understood things I did not understand. I listened. By the time you were 5, he said, I could see I was wrong about that part. She wasn't lonely. She was. Complete. You completed something in her. He stopped. He seemed surprised by his own sentence. I think I was jealous, he said. Not of you specifically, of how certain she was about you. She had never been that certain about anything. I thought about my mother, the photograph, and the word recognition. She told me about when she first saw my picture, I said. In the file. She told everyone, Daniel said. For years. She told that story constantly. Something moved across his face. I used to roll my eyes. I know, I said. He looked at me. You knew? You were not subtle about it, I said. He made a sound that might have been a laugh in different circumstances. Then it became an actual laugh, small and tired and real. I smiled. It was the first genuine exchange we had managed in 25 years. Not a resolution. Not the sudden warmth of a relationship that had been cold for decades, discovering overnight that it was something different. A beginning. The specific small beginning of 2 people who share a mother deciding to try something they had not tried before. That was enough for a sidewalk on an April morning. I moved into the house on Elmwood Drive in June. I did not rush. I gave myself the 2 months between Tuesday at Frances Odom's office and the day I moved my things in as a period of deliberate transition. Finishing the lease on my apartment, sorting through my own things, making the decisions about what to keep and what to release that moving always requires. I also spent time in the house before I lived in it. Not moving things, cleaning, or planning renovations. Just being in it. Sitting in the rooms at different times of day and understanding what the light did and what the house felt like when it was quiet. Learning it the way you learn something you intend to keep. My mother's things were still there. Not all of them. Practical decisions had to be made about furniture and clothing and the accumulated objects of a life. Daniel had helped with that process. He had come down from Richmond on a Saturday in May, and we had spent the day going through the house together with the particular combination of grief and practicality that sorting a parent's belongings requires. It was one of the longest days of my life and also one of the better ones. We talked about her. Not in the managed way of the days after the funeral, when there was too much to do to fully feel what we were feeling. Actually talked. Told stories. Remembered specific things. Found objects that produced memories neither of us had thought about in years. Daniel found a photograph in the bottom drawer of her desk. He and I? He was 23 or 24. I was 9 or 10. We were at the kitchen table. He was helping me with something. Math homework, maybe, or a project.
I was looking at him with the complete focused attention of a child who trusts the person helping them. He was looking at the paper but smiling slightly at something I must have said. He looked at that photograph for a long time. Then he handed it to me. I don't remember that day, he said. I don't either, I said. She kept it, he said. She kept everything, I said. That was her. He nodded slowly. I kept the photograph. It is on the desk in what is now my home office. The room that used to be my mother's study. The room where she wrote and graded papers and read and did the particular inner work of a woman who spent her professional life helping young people think more clearly. The photograph is on that desk because it belongs there, because it is evidence of something that was true even in the years when neither of us quite knew it was true. We were brother and sister. We just needed 25 years and 4 pages of our mother's handwriting to find our way to saying it clearly. Daniel called on a Sunday in July. Not for any particular reason. No logistics to manage. No estate business remaining. Simply a call. He asked how the house was settling. I told him about a plumbing issue I had discovered and a repair that had gone better than expected. He told me about a project at work. We talked for 35 minutes. When he was about to hang up, he said, "Same time next week?" I said yes. He said goodbye. We hung up. I sat in my mother's kitchen. My kitchen. With the phone in my hand and looked out the window at the backyard where the oak tree my mother had planted 20 years ago was doing what it did in July. Spreading its shade across the grass with the complete indifference of something that has grown large enough to have stopped thinking about growing and started simply being. Mom had planted that tree as a sapling. She had told me she planted it because she believed in doing things whose full results you would not live to see. That was her entirely. Planting trees. Writing 4 pages. Choosing a 3-year-old from a photograph and fighting through a process and bringing her home and spending 25 years. Making sure that when the moment arrived, the record would be accurate. She had planted a tree. She had planted a daughter. She had trusted the future enough to leave both in the ground and wait. I am 28 years old, and I live in my mother's house. My brother calls on Sundays. That sentence contains things I would not have believed possible 6 months ago, and that now feel like the most ordinary and natural facts of my life. The particular miracle of small true things. The house on Elmwood Drive is mine in every legal sense, and in every other sense too. I walk through its rooms with the specific knowledge of someone who has been given something deliberately. Not accidentally, not by default, but because someone thought carefully about who should have it, and why, and wrote 4 pages explaining their reasoning, and asked their attorney to read those 4 pages aloud in a room with witnesses. My mother thought carefully about everything. She thought carefully about me for 25 years. She thought carefully about Daniel, too, about what he needed to hear and how he needed to hear it, and the particular setting in which it would land most honestly. She chose Frances Odom's office. She chose the letter to be read aloud. She chose the Tuesday after the funeral, when the grief was real but not so raw that everything was impossible. She thought about the timing. She was an English teacher for 38 years. She understood that the moment a thing is said matters as much as the thing itself. She chose her moment. And in that moment, Daniel's face went pale, and I watched it and felt something that was not triumph. Triumph would have been the wrong feeling, but something closer to relief. The specific relief of a person who has been told they were nobody, discovering in public that the person who mattered most had always known otherwise and had made certain the record agreed. Nobody. He had said it quietly in the kitchen on a Saturday morning while I washed dishes. My mother had heard it. And in that moment, Daniel's face went pale, and I watched it and felt something that was not triumph. Triumph would have been the wrong feeling, but something closer to relief, the specific relief of a person who has been told they were nobody, discovering in public that the person who mattered most had always known otherwise, and had made certain the record agreed. I hope this story finds you. The people who see you clearly are keeping a record. And sometimes the record arrives in a room with witnesses at exactly the right moment. Thank you for being here today. If this story meant something to you, please share it with someone who might need the reminder.